Night Quartz. I think we've all seen that paranormal video making the rounds online right now. The video called Indisputable Evidence of Ghosts and Demons. I don't know who, or even how this viral video got to the internet. I do know it has ruined a solid decade of therapy dedicated to helping me fall asleep again. Now that it's out, I think it's time to tell the story and bring closure to it all. My sister and I were kids. She was 9 and I was 11 when this happened to us. It was supposed to be a 4-day ski trip to Minnesota. We took a day and a half to drive up from Tennessee. I had never seen snow before, but our parents loved it, and they loved to ski. I honestly felt like the family part of the family vacation was an afterthought. Not to say they didn't deserve a vacation, but I felt like we were being dragged along because they couldn't find a sitter. And they were trying in a ham-fisted sort of way to start a family vacation tradition. I wasn't super excited about the cold, or the skiing. We were heading deep into the Midwest during a record-setting cold snap. I frankly didn't have the vocabulary to describe my level of discomfort with the tundra as we headed north and west into something called the polar vortex. The initial excitement of the road trip wore off long before we hit the Minnesota state line. My sister, Fiona, was going through this phase of needing to stop and go to the bathroom every 50 miles or so. Not actually using the bathroom, it would turn out, but apparently just to simply admire and investigate the quality of said bathroom. To this day, I really don't have an explanation for this, but no fewer than 6 bathroom emergencies into the trip. We stopped at a 24/7 truck stop where she got out and apparently was thoroughly impressed with the quality of those particular bathrooms. Now, I suppose I had my quirks at this age, but mine did not require the entire family to stop. Nevertheless, it was still demanding. I went through quarters faster than a laundromat. I would play those claw machines at every truck stop, restaurant, and rest area we stopped at. I wasn't after anything in particular, though it would have been nice to win the Game Boy video game system I saw up in one of them. Usually all I got was candy or some small stuffed animal toy. But most of the time I didn't win anything at all. It was that last truck stop that had a number of arcade games and 3 claw machines, but only one was working. It'd be a change of luck for me in the claws. I was down to my last quarter my parents would give me, and as a joystick junkie, I went to work with it. With seconds remaining on the timer running down, I panicked, and I dropped the crane over nothing in particular. The claw seemed to dive and probably deep into a pile of prizes. It grabbed hold of something, though I wasn't sure what it was until it dropped it into the receptacle. I pulled it out, and it was a half-opened plastic bag filled with some leather and hemp scraps, encrusted with a small colored stones haphazardly hot glued onto them. Great, I thought, with some imitation semi-Native American jewelry available at virtually every gift shop and tourist trap we've already stopped at. Needless to say, I was disappointed. Don't forget that I was a little boy with an annoying little sister and some fairly rigid gender expectations. Fiona came racing out of the bathroom and saw me opening my prize with the jewelry dangling from my hands. "Jason likes jewelry, Jason likes jewelry," she chanted ad nauseum. "Jason wants to be a pretty little girl." I told her to shut up, and before long we got into a shoving match in the arcade room. Mom and Dad were quick to arrive and shut us down. Mom grabbed my hand as I reached out to swipe Fiona, and in the process, the necklace tumbled to the floor. Mom picked it up and she became rather enamored by it. She asked that if I didn't want it, if she could have it, and I said yes. I was quick to give away the other 2 bracelets, one to Fiona and another to my mother, who then forced my dad to wear it. I was indifferent to the distribution of the prize. It earned me 4 more quarters, and I was potentially always 1 quarter away from getting something really new and exciting. I had 1 piece left, which I thoroughly examined between the verbal and physical bouts and skirmishes with Fiona in the back seat. The stones glued to the knots of the leather and the hemp were not colored glass like I thought, but they were actually some kind of mineral. In fact, a shiny black and silver veined crystal similar to quartz. The leather itself was also marked with some sort of writing etched into it, although I really couldn't make it out. Eventually, I just gave up trying to decipher it and thought the colored blackish stones were cool enough, so I tied the last bracelet to my wrist and just kind of forgot about it. The rest of the drive was filled with snow. I was caught up in the whimsy of it, even as we were forced to slow to a crawling pace on the interstate during the last 100 miles or so. It was about sunset when we got to the city limits of the resort town, a place called Spirit Valley. Dad expertly maneuvered the SUV down the partially paved and snow-covered roads leading to the Grand Dam Lodge, our home away from home for the next 4 ski-filled days. By the time we arrived, the lodge had closed for the night, but the groundskeeper texted Dad and the code to a lockbox containing our cabin's key and directions to it. It was a fairly small 1-floor cabin with 2 bedrooms, which meant I had to share one of them with Fiona, a fact that was revealed only as we pulled up. Cheapskate Dad strikes again. Us weary travelers, faces already frozen from unpacking the car and straining from hauling the baggage to the front door of the cabin, were uninspired when we entered the cabin and found the lights were not working. Within a second of Dad shining his keychain flashlight into the dark cabin, we were greeted by water and ice slush on the floor, spreading from a busted pipe somewhere in the kitchen. Mom went into a bit of a panic as she jammed her armful of baggage back into the family truck. It didn't take long for Dad to pick up the phone and start raising holy hell with the groundskeeper. But it all worked out, because within 10 minutes we were greeted by a pickup truck escort to our new cabin. A bigger and better cabin, which Dad noted was 3 times on the way to it, was given to us at the same price as the smaller cabin. Mom audibly gasped as the new cabin became illuminated by 2 sets of headlights. It was 2 stories with a big wraparound deck, easily 3 times the size of the first cabin. I called the upstairs bedroom for myself, and my claim stuck. The old groundskeeper got out of his truck, handed Dad the keys, and departed. We went inside and found it to be incredibly warm, and to our shock, even had a hot tub in the living room. Really, the only downside was it was much further away from the main lodge and relatively isolated next to the woods. That downside was diminished upon further exploration of the cabin, which was well furnished with carved wood beds with woodland animal headboards. My bed was turtle-shaped, with the headboard shaped like an owl, with elaborate carvings of a turtle shell pattern. Fiona's bed was designed like a tree with squirrels running out of it, while the headboard in Mom and Dad's room was carved into a vaguely non-threatening bear, looking over and hugging the rest of the bed. When I say vaguely non-threatening, I was honestly glad I didn't have to sleep in it. But they were pretty impressed with it. Though we packed multiple coolers of groceries so we could make home-cooked meals, the extended travel and hassle of changing cabins left us with microwave macaroni and cheese for dinner. It was during this feast that Mom and Dad gave us the talk. The talk was about the cold weather safety. The gist of it was cold enough outside to kill us, and kill fast, especially in the dark. This was somewhat disconcerting due to the fact that the longest night of the year was in 2 days, and skiing was the primary activity, and it was unfortunately outdoors. They emphasized we could ski in short bursts with breaks, and that was it. When it was time to come in, it was time to come in. That night we settled in, watched some TV, despite being reminded several times in the car that we were not there to watch TV, and then it was time for bed. It must have been the traveling and the somewhat filling, if not delicious dinner, but I laid down on my bed for the first time. I could swear it was the most comfortable bed I ever laid down upon. I fell asleep with my head facing the window, facing the forest. I remember falling asleep, and I don't know exactly why I woke up when I did. I had the sense of joy and exhilaration from waking up in a strange yet comfortable place. But my joy was short-lived, as I quickly became aware of an unsettling noise coming from the outside. Like I said, I really didn't have much experience with snow or cold prior to this trip. But I can tell you now that sometimes in the coldest North states, during polar vortex conditions, the topmost layer of snow can sort of superfreeze into a glassy, icy, laminate, brittle surface. If you step on it, it makes this very loud, very satisfying, crunchy, shattering sound. Honestly, it feels like you're disintegrating a cinder block, or like you've bitten into the juiciest apple and gouged away a hunk of it with each and every step. It was that semi-bright, dim period of the morning. The sun wasn't quite up, but it was light enough to make out the outline of the forest and differentiate it from the short backyard leading to it. I'll never forget this noise. It was that crunchy noise, that squeaky, cracking, like stomping on glass with rubber boots on a chalkboard. But it was hundreds of boots. Hundreds of people marching through that snow in that forest, coming closer and closer to the house. Between the crunch of snow came the snapping of twigs and the rustling of dead undergrowth as the noise advanced. The thunder of this army stomping through the glassy snow carried through the woods, through the window, and right into my ears, right into my head. It took me a moment, but I became quickly alarmed and sat up with my eyes peering into the gray, into the forest, trying to locate the source of the noise. I got this sense, though, that whatever the noise was, it had already located me. Snow flurries were buffeting the window. Even though it was technically getting lighter out, I still couldn't see what or who was approaching as I frantically scanned and strained my eyes with my face pressed against the window. I had to wipe the condensation from my quickening breath several times as I started to panic and started to consider alerting Dad to the approach of whatever it was. Suddenly, the sun appeared through the snow flurries, and faint, struggling yellow glow light up the yard and the forest. And with that glow, the stampede encroaching upon the cabin seemed to stop and turn and rush back into the forest as if it were routed by the appearance of the sun. The sound fell away to a low din, and it finally dissipated into the distance. I jumped when my mom knocked on the door. Breakfast apparently was almost ready. It was quite the spread of pancakes, eggs, and bacon. Dad spun around the table, dropping even more pancakes, boasting of his early morning hike to the Grand Dam Lodge's general store to purchase Minnesota's finest maple syrup. With that information, I stood down my guard somewhat. It was entirely possible that I heard in the snow was Dad on his early morning syrup expedition. I didn't ask him when he left or if Mom started the pancakes or anything to verify. I just wanted to put that sound out of my mind, and I ate up. We skied a good chunk of the morning. I'll admit I spent most of the time on the bunny hills, but I took to it pretty quick. I probably could have ventured out in some of the bigger hills, but I guess I didn't want to risk it. That, and I had to look after Fiona, who, either by face or by butt, melt the snow more times than I care to share here. Mom and Dad went off on their own, rekindling their love and their love affair with skiing, the big hills with the lift and all. By about 10 in the morning, Fiona looked absolutely frigid, and I had no choice but to bring her in, which unfortunately meant Mom and Dad had to come as well to return her rented skis. Dad was very annoyed as we all retreated to the Grand Dam Lodge to warm up in front of the lodge's giant fireplace and get hot cocoa. I remember making fun of Fiona for falling so much. I was getting sugar rushed with my feet up and lobbed any insult to her that came to mind. My mind was carefree compared to where it was this morning. Fiona tried feebly to retaliate in the name game, but when she stopped abruptly and stared at me, she stared at something behind me, she did far more damage to me than any name could. I turned my head and met nearly face to face with an elderly man with a rocky face chiseled with a horrified yet angry scowl. His eyes weren't facing towards me. His eyes were transfixed on my sister's arm, the arm with the bracelet that I had won. I didn't want to sound rude, but I told him in my squeaky, sweaty, semi-scared, confident, totally 11-year-old fake deep voice, "Take a picture, it'll last longer." His eyes rolled over to meet mine, and his mouth creaked open slightly to let out a foul-smelling, whistling groan. He then licked his lips and whistled again. This time he whistled out the words, "Night Quartz. Night Quartz." Fortunately, or unfortunately, Mom and Dad came over and immediately started to apologize to the old man, whom they identified as the groundskeeper. They ran through a litany of apologies for things I nor Fiona did. Sorry they spilled something. Sorry they said something. Sorry they were rude. Sorry that we're young. The man at first didn't care, but eventually he settled on my mother, and his eyes widened as he stared into the necklace I won adorning her neck. After a few senior moments, he whistled out, "Oh, everything's fine. I just was lost in my reminiscence of myself and my sister at that age. You kids enjoy it while it lasts. I need to get back to work. Please excuse me." He attempted a smile and walked away, ducking into a room labeled employees only. Mom and Dad leveled unfair threats of punishment against us for crimes we did not commit. After the incident with the groundskeeper, we tried skiing again, but the negative 15-degree wind chill put a damper on that. Dad was a little PO'd, and he let everyone know it. We ate at the lodge's restaurant. The special was some kind of crunchy almond panko-breaded fish, steamed broccoli and carrots, and an oversized wedge of black forest chocolate cake. I was unnerved by the dinner after that first bite. The crunching was uncomfortable to hear in my head. It was even more uncomfortable as Mom, Dad, Fiona, and virtually all of the other 30 or so people in the room chowed down on that crunchy fish. I was left so unsettled I barely touched my otherwise delicious cake. I shut the door to my bedroom and turned off the lights. I was struck with unease as I looked out the window towards the dark forest. I turned on the porch light so I could see the yard and part of the forest from here. I hid under the blankets, only exposing my eyes as I watched like a dedicated sentry the edge of the tree line. I eventually fell asleep, and eventually that noise came back. It woke me up and sent me into a frenzy. The sound was louder and faster this time. It was like somebody was chopping up styrofoam in my room with an axe. I quaked as I watched the little circle of light spinning down from the porch. To my utter amazement and terror, I saw cracks, footprints, and little sprays of snow leaping up from the ground as if an invisible mob advanced on the house from the forest. I froze. I absolutely froze in my bed as I saw dozens, if not 100 or more invisible feet dash from the woods across the backyard, funneling into a narrow column straight of phantom footprints headed for the back door of the house. The sun suddenly erupted in the sky, and with its appearance the army stopped and then seemed to be routed back into the forest again. I was wrapped in those footprints, and in short order I was compelled to go downstairs and leave the house, forgetting my hat and glove, through the back door to examine them. With one minor gust of wind, I immediately regretted leaving the house in this condition. But, unfortunately, I needed not go far to verify what I had seen. My hands shook as I pressed my hands into the indentations in the snow, left by some mysterious force. "All right, kid," a voice came from beside me. I nearly jumped out of my skin as I turned and saw the groundskeeper approach me, hobbling slowly over the snow. "You need to give me your bracelet, and your mom's necklace, and your sister's bracelet. You need to give them to me. Now. We need it." I stood up, shaking from the cold and shaking from fear, and then bolted towards the back door. I grabbed the knob, and it was locked. The old man was about a dozen feet behind me, grabbing at the air as he staggered towards me. I started to scream and pound on the door. As he closed, I ran away, tripping in the snow as I did. The old man whistled after me as I crawled to try to regain my footing. I kept screaming as I tried to make it around the house to the front door. I rounded the front, and I saw Dad striding up with a half-gallon jug of milk in hand. He came running up to help me. I spat out what I could while shivering about the groundskeeper coming after me. Dad took out his phone and called the police, and then lodged security as the groundskeeper rounded the side of the house and came to a stop. He stumbled in the snow. Out of breath, he fell to his knees, shaking and collapsing into a fallen snow angel. Lodge security, police, and then paramedics showed up. Apparently, the groundskeeper suffered a heart attack, but he was still alive. He was taken under care and under arrest. The police said they found a spare key for our cabin in his possession, along with several knives. It occurred to us, one way or another, he was going to enter our home, away from home, with several knives. We definitely considered cutting the vacation short and leaving at that point. Ultimately, that decision rested with Dad. Dad wouldn't hear of it. Especially not after the Grand Dam Lodge basically comped the entire trip for us. Free cabin, free skiing, and even a gift card for the general store. In Dad's assessment, with the groundskeeper exposed as a violent criminal and removed from the area, the threat was over, and there was no reason to leave. Then I told Dad about the noise and the tracks outside. Dad was a nuclear physicist. He didn't believe a thing that I said. On principle, as a man of science and of skiing, he just said the noises that I heard in the footprints were from the groundskeeper. Everything else must have been a dream, must have been part of my imagination. So we went skiing again. I was distracted, and my mind was unbalanced as my body. I fell a half dozen times, and I started to make Fiona look good at this. I began to chalk up my earlier success to beginner's luck. Over the bunny hills, it just kind of stuck with me. It hit me that I wasn't making this up. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't dreaming it. It was all real. And it wasn't the groundskeeper. At least, it wasn't all the groundskeeper. And there was something about the necklaces and the bracelets. What part was needed, and why, and for whom? I faked twisting my ankle. Although I had stayed out much longer, it would not have been fake. I sat contemplating the apparent ghostly activity over hot chocolate in front of the fireplace at the lodge again. I watched the whipped cream dissolve in my hot chocolate as it disappeared into a ghoulish white face, although probably a coincidence, it was very unnerving. So unnerving I literally shuddered and pushed it out of sight. My mind felt cramped and strung out from the sugar buzz, and I needed to shake it off, so I found myself wandering the lodge and straying into the general store. The general store was kitschy and utilitarian at the same time. For every gift shoppy gag item whoopee cushion, there was a practical item like a cast iron pan or a food staple. I was trying to lose myself in the place, but I rounded a corner and found myself face to face with poorly packed plastic bags filled with jewelry similar to the claw machine prize. I noted that the leather and hemp didn't differ from item to item. Only the color and type of crystal did. I noted the different colors of quartz crystals available at the shop, with only the item night quartz missing from the selection, as indicated by a light tan tag hanging on an empty hook. I felt compelled to bring the tag to the counter where a middle-aged woman manned the cash register. She asked me if I found everything okay, and I told the woman I was looking for the item marked by the tag as missing. She seemed to swallow hard, and she explained to me that management stopped stocking the item. She didn't have any additional explanation, so I put the tag back on the hook and left the store. Mom came into the lodge and was exhausted from skiing all day. She took us back to the cabin early. There wasn't much to do there. The novelty of it all had worn off, and I was also deeply unsettled. I wished I was back home. I wished I was in school. Being that age, I hated school, so this was quite the statement. The cabin had an Ethernet line, and I set up Dad's laptop, and I looked up night quartz online. I saw a lot of New Age health sites conjecture on them and present them as magical cleansers of one's life force and surroundings. Other entries were mundane or unbelievable entirely. The authors of the sites claimed it was the most powerful cleaning crystal of the spirit, while the more scientific pages on the mineral were even less remarkable, save for the fact that if one were rubbing the crystals or crushing them, it had the ability to release something called tribal luminescence light in significantly greater quantities than other quartz crystals. The crystal itself was not valuable and was relatively common in certain areas of the country, although notably not common here. Although I didn't care for school at this age, I, like my father, did like science. Science was my jam. I was lost as to why 25 cents worth of a common mineral was worth so much to an old man. But I felt like I needed to get rid of it. It was irrational, and I knew that, but I had made up my mind. So I untied my bracelet from my arm and tossed it into the big fireplace. The leather and hemp went up almost immediately. The crystals seemed to hiss and then pop, leaving a slightly off-putting green glow in their wake. I wasn't going to stop there. I was committed to removing all of the night quartz from my family.